Fantastic. Welcome to the NWES Event Show 2026. More than 30 years bringing the industry together. More than 30 years. They bring real people. They give real insights, no fluff. I won't be talking too much because our first speaker is going to talk to us about AI, and I am excited about it. But before we do that, why don't we give a round of applause to our sponsors of the room today? Thank you very much. Interfly and AV360. And thank you to all of the sponsors of NWES Event Show. Our talk this morning to wake us up is about AI. AI as human capacity expander. And we have the best person to talk to us about that. I'm not even going through her entire list of accolades, but what you have to know, she has 20 years of experience, and she is an award-winning AI strategist. We are hearing it from a pro. So, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Anca Platon Trifan.
Wait, I know this much. Merci beaucoup.
De rien. Allez. Merci, Anca.
Thank you so much, Celine. I think I'm going to skip through a few slides. Oh, right on time. Perfect. Wonderful. So I don't see my notes anymore. Hi, everyone. Isn't it wonderful to start today with just an AI session? Because, I mean, what else could you do with your time but this? I am super excited to be at NWES again. I was here last year. I had a workshop on AI as well. And this session is more of a introduction to what I'm going to speak more about later at 11. So in 20 minutes or less, if we can get this preview monitor up, we are going to just give you a bit of a taste of what the session is going to be at 11. If we can get the preview monitor, I'm just going to get my laptop. Can we just troubleshoot really quick? It was working literally a minute ago, but that's technology. I was working on the app that actually I deployed for all of you for later, whoever wants to join me at 11. And I was test driving it in the morning at 6 a.m., and of course it crashed. And I'm like, could this be any better, like with the timing of it all? Because, I mean, how many of you have run event registration pages and everything was perfect during the setup and test, and then when it's about to go live? Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, so this is basically what's happening right now. So let me get my things up and running. While we're doing that, why don't you turn around to the people, maybe find someone else that you can turn around to say hi. How are you feeling today? Just put a name to the emotion. I'm feeling anxious. So I'm going to try to get my things together here. All right, so we're gonna do with what we have. I'm gonna try to use this as my preview monitor because I don't know where I am on my slides unless I look at it, right? So here's something that in 2026, if you haven't yet gotten the memo, it's sort of like the reality that I personally have felt in the last, 4-something months that this year has brought. And that is more. More of everything, more events, more demands, more apps, more AI, more everything that you can imagine. And it's also moving parts and stakeholders. And what that means is their expectations is so much higher. The timelines are so much more compressed. And with that also comes responsibility that's actually tied to outcomes. It's not just responsibility for the sake of responsibility. So events are no longer measured now by just some kind of a moment, right? They're measured by how can you drive business. It's a business driver. And because of that, we're talking about pipeline, we're talking about retention, we're talking about executive confidence and impact. How does that impact the future of our events, but also our businesses? So whether you ask for it or not, this is your new job description, so here we are. The industry got pretty much so much bigger. I was pulling this report, and just this year we have hit $1.46 trillion, and it's up 10% from last year. What's interesting is that we are on track to hit $2 trillion this decade. That's not just growth in volume, right? That is also growth in complexity, in expectations, in scrutiny, which means that your job just got more complicated and more wider, not just bigger. So we're talking about all this set of responsibilities that you're supposed to be doing. You're not just executing events anymore. You're very much thinking strategically. You're aligning stakeholders. You're managing technology. You're proving value. You're shaping experiences. All of this is making sure, while making sure that everything works, all at the same time, all the time. So one thing that I've come to realize is that while execution is expected, influence is earned. The people that are gaining trust are not the ones that just deliver. Delivery is already expected. They're the ones who can ask better questions. They're the ones that can shape the direction earlier. They're the ones that can connect the data to decisions and outcomes. And at the same time, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be like advancing. At the same time, technology, especially AI technology, has been flooding the event space, and most of it is adding a lot of noise. You probably have been trying to keep up with it, and then you realize, this is a full-time job. I don't know if I can actually do it. But I also see a shift that's happening right now because this is kind of like what's changing, what it means to be good at this job. The silver lining of all of this is that one thing hasn't changed, and that is great events require humans. They're still very human, right? That's one thing that hasn't changed. So they're still built on emotion and attention and participation, connection. Not just dashboards and tools. I mean, this is the reasons why you came to this event, right? You want to see people face to face. You want to engage with them. You want to make sure that you have some connection and then some conversation, and hopefully that will lead to some business later. So not only that you're not managing more tools, but what's happening, especially, there's this gap that I see a lot across our industry. And that's the fact that we have more tools than ever. We're actually working on an event right now, and they're changing the technology just as they're about to go live with the registration page. And there's not a lack of options. There's so many options. But the problem is, just because you have more AI features, just because you have more automation layer, just because you have more integrations, that doesn't mean that there's not fragmentation underneath that. And probably some of you have experienced that because tools don't just always deliver, especially if you don't have the right integrations, especially if there's no context shared between different tools. And AI lives inside this ecosystem, inside those platforms, but they don't always live across the entire operation. And I think the pressure here is when something were to break, that's when people start to compensate. But how do they compensate? They compensate manually. Literally, this event that we're working on for the registration, just because one part of the flow didn't work, they want to go back to spreadsheets. They threw their hands in the air. They're like, no, this doesn't work. We're going back to our old ways. That's the human way to deal with friction, right? But that's a problem, because if that is the default, how do we scale? So let me get back here to my slides. One of the questions that I've asked myself, and it's a trick question, but I'm sure some of you actually had to face the answer, is if everything is expanding, expectations, complexity, responsibility, why then so many event systems break under pressure? And from what I can see, and this is boots on the ground, like little boots on the ground, is because most teams are trying to scale effort instead of building systems. Again, going back to the example that I just gave, right? Like, let's just put more effort into it. Let's just put more hours. Let's just add more spreadsheets on top of spreadsheets, instead of trying to step back and look like, what is the workflow? What is the system? So that's the main gap that I'm seeing here right now. It's not the talent. It's not the tools. It's not the effort, right? It's the structure underneath it all. Okay. But here's where AI complicates things. And I'm not here to be Debbie Downer. I promise, there's hope. But the problem is when you throw AI at this, right, you increase speed across the entire system, but if the system is not designed in a way that can hold that, you don't get relief. What you get is compression. You get more pressure, you get more stress. I personally know that I'm running a lot of projects at the same time, and there's a few AI agents behind all those processes, and at the end of the day, like, my brain hurts, hurts more than before, because there's so much load that comes with constantly switching tasks, constantly reviewing the output. A lot of my job right now is literally reviewing, making sure that whatever I got from this one system, it can move forward into the next step. Now, that is one of the problems that I see, right? Like, just because you have a bunch of AI on top of a bunch of systems that are fragmented, that doesn't make it easier. That just adds more pressure. On the other hand, right, if you have AI with structured system, that is more aligned to capacity. That is where performance can happen. Unfortunately, most organizations, they just apply AI at the surface, and instead of spending more time and more thought behind what is the system underneath that's holding this. Here's one thing that I want you to think about. Intelligence becomes whatever role you assign it to be. And it was the topic of the recent conversation I just had on the Events Demystify podcast, the podcast that I host. And the thing is, if this is true, right, then most of us have been underscoping it, because what happens with leading intelligence, that's not just managing tasks. That's not prompting better. That is designing how judgment actually works. If we were using AI, and this is a lot of people, just as a glorified chatbot, right? We're asking questions, we're assigning some small task, we keep it contained, then there is no surprise that the response that we get is also contained. But when you start to give it context and responsibility, a role in how things are supposed to move forward, something shifts. And that's where AI becomes more than just this tool. It becomes part of how you think. It's your chief of staff. I actually have a chief of staff which manages some of the AI agents that I work with, but I have to give it the responsibility, and then I have to be okay with taking the risk of that, right? So all of that works hand in hand here. Now, this is where I also saw the need for endurance. And if you've ever trained for a race, in my case, I'm actually training for my first Ironman in July. And let me tell you, that is a lot of training. I think we're going to go over 5 minutes because of the tech issues. So I'm not going to stay on time, just giving you a heads up. The point of endurance is it's not proven when conditions are great. It's proven when everything is falling apart, when your body is tired, when you're depleted, when you're under stress, when these things don't work the way you thought they would be, right? Well, the thing is, events are no different. Events are the same way because if, for example, data doesn't match across systems, if, for example, timelines compress overnight, or if you get teams that are working in completely two different versions of reality, right? Version 1, version 2, version 3, version 100, that's when endurance shows up, or maybe it doesn't. So that's where I came with this equation. I call it the event endurance equation. It's a framework that tells whether or not an event system or a system in general that is including AI part of it will hold under pressure. And the event equation is basically the system connectivity multiplied by context integrity multiplied by automation rate over manual intervention load. And each one of those variables will tell a story. So I'm going to break it down really quick so that you kind of have the idea. And in my next session, I'm actually going to take this equation and apply it to a real workflow and see if it holds. So system connectivity is obviously about the flow. It's not just about integration on paper. It's about whether or not your registration can inform your agenda. If a speaker update cascades, if there's a change in a speaker update, does that cascade downstream? If your teams are operating right from different several sources, and I'm supposed to be advancing here, you're already, if you're doing all of those things and you have to touch it, that means you're doing manual work. And that is not what system connectivity really applies. So then you can give that score, be like, okay, 1 to 10, that's a 2. Like, I guess we're really not necessarily applying this properly. The next one, when it comes to automation rate, is not the fact that, did I skip one? No, we're in context integrity, good. So context integrity is rarely about volume. It's about meaning. So if you have the wrong versions in circulations of whatever form that you're working on, or maybe outdated timing assumptions, or maybe missing dependencies, right? Or you have unclear ownership, all of that will dictate if AI operates in the context or without context. And it will also dictate if you will produce confident mistakes, which AI can do, also at a higher speed. And to me, that's worse than having no AI at all. The automation rate is what I skipped ahead for a second. It's not the fact that we use AI. It's whether a change in one part of the system will trigger the right response in another without anyone having to remember, anyone having to manually bridge the gap, right? So if a human has to notice that it doesn't work, that's not automation. That's a reminder system. So that's kind of like, that's the formula that we're talking about it. And then manual intervention load, right? This is the silent pressure. Think about when things start falling apart. What do? You send more emails. You send more Slack messages. You're on Teams. You're trying to compensate with all these methods that now are just replacing the broken workflow. Last minute overrides, right, that are becoming standard procedures because everybody is in anxiety mode. Also, quick fixes that also become part of the norm. All of those basically represent a place where a system, the system that you thought that you put together, is right now out of structure. And if a person had to fill in the gap, that means that load is on them, and that load will eventually accumulate over time, and it will turn into what I mentioned earlier, cognitive overload. Now, cognitive overload is interesting because it's not something that we always pay attention to, but we do feel it. When the equation works, and this is important, something shifts. The system actually becomes invisible. AI stops being a tool you experiment with in isolation, and it just becomes part of how operations run. And the workflows that emerge out of that, they aren't always impressive, but what they do, even they might not be the most sophisticated workflows, they're impressive because they are invisible. They're just part of how things are. They just hold. A small example was where I applied the equation recently is when we got a bunch of changes in materials for a speaker for a conference which had a lot of tracks. And the workflow was once one change came and an update had to be done, all of that was tracked, approved, and version controlled across teams without a single back and forth email. And the trigger was the change, the output was alignment, and nobody has to manage it manually because the system was already designed to carry that load, not lose it somewhere in the middle of the handout whenever at what point that was. So when this equation worked, as I said, okay, I guess I need to go one more. Okay, so where does that leave us, right? Because there's definitely parts where AI is genuinely good at things like pattern recognition, processing large volumes, generating options at scales. But things that humans excel at, those are the things that we still want to keep and want to do well. Judgments, nuance, reading and spoken dynamics, especially in a room, in a client, in an organization. That still has to stay human. The value in things is not just doing work, is designing the thinking that guides that work. That requires something more that most organizations, they really need to protect right now, and that is cognitive capacity. That goes, as a result of cognitive overload, we need to look at how do we protect our cognitive capacity. And if people are overworked, if they're overloaded, and they're fragmented, and they're constantly reacting, better tools won't fix that. But maybe, just maybe, better systems might. Now, I wanted to highlight something really quick, and I guess I was here on this slide. Capacity is not just a wellness perk. It's a leadership design problem. And in a world where the goal is no longer just the output, but capacity under pressure, that's where we need to think about how do we design our events for capacity. If your cognitive bandwidth, if your team's cognitive bandwidth is spent holding everything else together manually. And talking about that, I just want to invite you to a conversation that's going to happen tomorrow afternoon where we actually talk about AI, about cognitive overload, about neuroscience, how can we make this better. So that's my pitch to that. We're going to have an AI data scientist, and we're going to have a wellness architect and a neuroscientist. Now in closing, this is what I want to leave you with. As I'm training for my first Ironman, as I said, I am not training for perfect conditions. I'm actually training so that in case that everything fails, I don't drown. So that if I'm exhausted and if I'm not able to keep going, I have a plan. In events, the same way as an athlete doesn't discover their endurance on the day of the event, in events, you have to try and you have to test the systems prior to getting yourself to the day of the race, right? And for me, that just means that I am going to discover it on the days leading to it, not on the days when everything is supposed to work instead of falling apart. And that's where events are no different. Now, I'm going to skip straight to the end because I want to be mindful of time since we're already going over time. AI, I'm going to have to go through quite a few. Right. So effort doesn't scale, endurance does. I feel like I shortcut you guys because I had some great conclusions to draw, and now I'm left with go fast. And can you skip to the 28th slide, please? Yeah, here, AI delivers on its promise. Where AI delivers on its promise, here, is not by replacing people, but by expanding what they are capable of sustaining. And that is the shift that I wanted to highlight here. Going from efficiency to endurance, from concept to application. That's where I want to take you next in the 11 o'clock workshop. Hopefully things will work, just saying. I want to go in a few workflows. I'm going to have some homework for all of you that will join us to do. I set up this app, AI Workflows for Event Professionals. They're going to take it for a ride, and we'll see if it breaks or it doesn't. And the whole idea is to see in your own workflow, can you apply the endurance equation, and will that workflow hold, or will it follow, or will it basically fall apart? That's the challenge here. So if you want to join me, please do so. And thank you so much for, for holding this together. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you at 11 o'clock. I think it's the downstairs room.
Merci beaucoup,
Thank
Anca.
you.
Thank you very much, Anca. Thank you.